Today is April 10, Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform continues its operation. My name is Vasyl Samokhvalov and joining us online is Mykyta Poturaev, Chair of the Humanitarian and Information Policy Committee of the Parliament of Ukraine. And we will be talking about Kyiv-Pechersk Lavra, and not only about that. Good afternoon, Mr. Mykyta. Good afternoon, Mr. Vasyl. Nice to see you. Nice to see you too. Mr. Mykyta, Kyiv-Pechersk Lavra, what and how will it end in? I'm convinced it will end with the victory of Ukrainian society and Ukrainian state. When it will end when it will be in accordance with the legal process. The return of the Lavra to the ownership of the state and relevant activities are already underway. I mean, the lease agreements were already nullified. Now it's difficult to work because the case is in the court at the moment. I'm convinced that the truth is on the side of the government. The resolution, the court award, will be in favor of Ukrainian people. However, I want to say that the state committing those actions that were initiated and making decision on termination of the lease agreement act quite legally and lawfully. The resolution may be not as important, but from the point of view of European legal practice, it's good to have the court resolution, so there is nothing wrong about it, nothing wrong about the fact that we have to stand our rights in the court. It does not result in any delays, but I would say it just makes process a little bit longer, and it will have a positive result. It will play a positive role. It's good that you mentioned the legal practice in Europe, so I will have a couple of questions in this regard. If I'm not mistaken, the local government of Rivne region voted for the prohibition of Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate. So my question is, what is the future of this church in Ukraine? And the second question is how the world will see it and how the Europe will see it, because it's the freedom of confession, one of the biggest values, one of the most important values in Europe. Well, yeah, it's a basic freedom, basic liberty, is the liberty of conscience, affirmed by the Declaration of Human Rights. In fact, based on that declaration, the Helsinki agreements were right on. It's one of the fundamental liberties of the human being, which should be recognized by all the people, and Ukraine doesn't violate anything in this sense, because we're not fighting the religion, we're not fighting the adherence of the church. In fact, it's no subject to any of the draft laws registered with the Verkhovna Rada for the time being. What Ukraine is doing is, by all those draft laws, documents that the religious organizations based in the aggressor state, which are merged with the dictatorship, with this organization, they have nothing to do with Ukrainian religious organizations. Or I would rather say that Ukrainian religious organizations should have no relations with the religious organizations originating from the aggressor state. Moreover, in any way they cannot in any way submit to such organizations. I personally think that for us it will be optimal to adopt and expedite the adoption of the draft law developed by the Cabinet of Ministers, because it says about all the religious organizations, not any specific one. And it is important because, as I mentioned, in the so-called Russian Federation, the government went crazy, and on the level of the religious organizations, they got crazy too. Not only the so-called Russian Orthodox, so-called Russian, so-called Orthodox, so-called Church. I intentionally repeat it 3 times because it's some cannibal sect, absolutely wicked. They have nothing to do with religion, with the Church, with the Orthodox Christianity, and the same is about Muslim organizations and Buddhist religious organizations. I was really very badly surprised by what's going on in Russia, and even among such exotic currents as shamanism, they all support the genocide of Ukrainians, dictatorship of Putin, they all support the war. I think it's a common desire of the Ukrainian people to set this condition on the legislative level, not to have Ukrainian religious organizations have any connections with those perverts, I mean religious perverts. What it says about is those laws, they have to end up in the session room of the parliament, and delays with adoption of those laws only results in the jeopardization of situation in the country. And I think that Verkhovna Rada should gather all their strength and will and adopt the relevant resolution. There should be no political competition in there, and I call everybody through my media colleagues to support those requirements to the parliament and to address not only the active part of the Ukrainian society but the whole of it, to exercise pressure on the deputies of the parliament, because the time to adopt that law has come. That law was developed upon the resolution of the president and NSDC, and at least after the Easter, Verkhovna Rada should consider the draft law in the first reading at least. A law like this should emerge in Ukraine, which would enable Ukrainian state, any politician, any diplomat, any citizen convincingly communicate with our Western partners, even those who ask sometimes maybe unpleasant questions. We have to tell them that it's not about religion or faith or freedom of confession. It's logically about the connections, relations with the organizations which are the instruments of Putin's dictatorship. This is what it's all about, and it doesn't touch confession in no way. I would like to ask for some details. You are a person integrated into parliamentary diplomacy. How is this opinion perceived by our European colleagues? Well, for example, during the last winter session of the Assembly of OSCE, we boycotted it, but we had another parallel session with Ukraine. There were more than 30 meetings with different countries, with the delegations of different countries of OSCE. We brought up that matter in there. We explained Ukrainian position. It was perceived quite well. Currently, the situation is a little bit more complicated for us because we see that the society that has reasonable claims, sometimes there are conflicts arising related to the requirements of the communities in terms of transition of the temples, handing them over from one church to another. There are conflicts arising sometimes aggressive conflicts. So those issues are being brought up in the information space of the democratic countries. So again, I emphasize this draft law is important, it's necessary, it has to be adopted to have this handover happen in a legal and democratic way. We have to have this law that we may rely upon, and then what's important too is that adoption of such law, I hope, will expedite the unification of the constructive. Well, talking about the Orthodox Church, that there is a lot of patriotic people in there, more than collaborationists. I cannot operate the exact numbers for the time being, but I know for sure that there are a lot of priests who they are not like top-level bishops, but they are just regular priests who consider for themselves the option of reunification with the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. It's a normal process, they treat it quite easily, and they believe that the day will come when we will have the local autocephalic Ukrainian church, and those are the processes that we should support, and adoption of such law is about to stimulate such processes in the church. If I'm not mistaken, there are 8,500 Ukrainian Orthodox Church communities of Moscow Patriarchate. By the end of this year, how may this number reduce in European? And well, it's difficult to say. I would say it's even a little bit dangerous for the process of unification, which is moving slowly but steadily. What I can say is that according to the information I have, you probably remember, when the full-scale invasion began, when the war began to eradicate Ukrainian people and Ukrainian state, there was a very powerful address of the group of the priests of the Orthodox Church, which demanded from their top-level bishops to cut ties with Russia, to condemn Putin and the so-called Russian Orthodox Church, and that group listed 400 priests, then the number grew to 600, then to 800, now it's more than 1,000 priests, and it happened within 1 year. So, judging by these dynamics, we may model the situation. I wouldn't like to, well, in these matters I try to be very cautious. I don't want to create any false expectations. This process, it has a huge potential, it's underway, and I hope that the weighted but consistent steps on part of both society and the state are needed to support this process. They will expedite this process. I hope we will see more promising numbers shortly, probably within half a year. Well, we hope the same. Thank you very much. Joining us was Mykyta Poturaev, the chair of the Parliamentary Committee of the Humanitarian and Information Policy, and we were discussing such a delicate topic as religion in Ukraine. See you shortly.